Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The rain didn't fall. It hammered against the earth like a judgment, washing away the scent of pine and replacing it with the metallic tang of fear. Yeonwoo's lungs burned as if he had swallowed live coals, his legs threatening to buckle with every frantic step he took through the sludge of the Black Forest. Don't stop. Don't look back. If you stop, you belong to him forever. He scrambled over a slick root, his white tunic torn at the shoulder, mud staining the expensive silk that had been his prison uniform for 3 months. A crack of thunder shook the ground, but it wasn't the storm that made his blood freeze, it was the sound that followed. A low, guttural growl, not from a beast, but from an engine. The sleek, black armored vehicle tore through the underbrush 100 yards to his left, its headlights slicing through the darkness like the eyes of a predator. He had been foolish to think he could outrun the Grand Duke of Kydra. He had been foolish to think the bond could be severed by distance. Yeonwoo threw himself behind the thick trunk of an ancient oak, pressing a hand over his mouth to stifle the ragged gasps that tore at his throat. The rain soaked his hair, plastering the silver strands to his pale forehead. He squeezed his eyes shut. Please. Just let me pass. Just let me disappear. The engine cut off. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm. It was a suffocating pressure, a physical weight that descended upon the forest. It was him. Yeonwoo. The voice wasn't shouted. It was a terrifyingly calm baritone that seemed to vibrate against Yeonwoo's very bones. It carried the alpha command, a resonant frequency that made Yeonwoo's knees hit the mud before his brain could tell them to stand. Come out. The voice continued, smooth as velvet over a blade. You've ruined your shoes. Yeonwoo bit his lip until he tasted copper. He couldn't move. The biological imperative to obey was warring with the desperate, human need for freedom. He was an omega of the high court, a rarity, a prize. But to Duke Kalen dragged him from his family's estate in the dead of night, claiming a debt that didn't exist. Yeonwoo had been nothing more than a possession, a bird in a gilded cage. Footsteps crushed the wet leaves. Slow, deliberate, the stride of a man who owned the land, the storm, and the trembling creature hiding in the dark. Yeonwoo's scent, sweet vanilla and distress, betrayed him. He knew Kalen could smell it. The Duke's own pheromones, a suffocating blend of burnt cedar and ozone, began to saturate the air, making Yeonwoo dizzy. It was the scent of a storm before the lightning strikes. A shadow fell over him. Yeonwoo looked up. Kalen stood there, unbothered by the torrential rain. He wore a long, black trench coat that billowed slightly in the wind, his tailored suit underneath immaculate. His hair, black as a raven's wing, was slicked back, revealing the sharp, aristocratic angles of his face. But it was his eyes that held Yeonwoo captive, glowing with a faint, predatory crimson luminescence in the dark. Found you, Kalen whispered. He didn't look angry. He looked hungry. I won't go back, Yeonwoo choked out, though his voice was barely a whisper. He tried to scramble backward, his hands slipping in the mud. I'd rather die in this forest. Kalen tilted his head, a look of mock contemplation on his face. He crouched down, ignoring the mud that threatened his polished boots, bringing himself to eye level with Yeonwoo. He reached out, his leather-gloved hand gripping Yeonwoo's chin, forcing him to look up. Die, Kalen repeated, the word rolling off his tongue like a bad taste. You think death is an escape from me? My sweet, foolish Yeonwoo. Even if you were a ghost, I would tear apart the underworld to chain you to my side. Why? Yeonwoo cried out, the tears finally mixing with the rain on his cheeks. Why me? You have the world. You have the empire. Why can't you just let me go? Kalen's thumb brushed over Yeonwoo's trembling lower lip. Because the world is boring. And you are the only thing that makes the noise stop. Without warning, Kalen moved. He scooped Yeonwoo up into his arms as if he weighed nothing more than a feather. Yeonwoo thrashed, beating his fists against the Duke's broad chest, but it was like striking a stone wall. Let me go? Kalen, save your energy, Kalen murmured against the shell of Yeonwoo's ear, sending a shiver of terrified pleasure down the Omega's spine. You'll need it. Punishment awaits the disobedient. The ride back to the Obsidian Palace was suffocating. Yeonwoo sat on the plush leather seat of the limousine, shivering uncontrollably. The climate control was set to a comfortable warmth, but the chill in his marrow refused to leave. Kalen sat opposite him, legs crossed, reading a dossier on a tablet as if he hadn't just hunted down a human being in a thunderstorm. Every now and then, Kalen's eyes would flick up, checking on Yeonwoo with a possessiveness that felt like a physical touch. "Drink," Kalen commanded, sliding a crystal glass of amber liquid across the small table between them. Yeonwoo stared at it. "I don't want your liquor. It's tea. With a sedative. Your pheromones are sour with panic. It offends me." "Then let me out," Yeonwoo snapped, his defiance flaring up for a brief, suicidal second. Kalen set the tablet down. The air in the car thickened instantly. He leaned forward, the predator re-emerging from the facade of the civilized aristocrat. "Do you know why I came alone, Yeonwoo?" Kalen asked softly. Yeonwoo stayed silent, pressing himself into the corner of the door. "Because if I had sent my guards," Kalen continued, his voice dropping an octave, "they would have smelled you. An unbonded Omega, in heat, distressed, running through the woods. They would have torn you apart before bringing you back to me. I came alone to save you from them. And this is the thanks I receive." Yeonwoo's eyes widened. He hadn't realized. The heat. It was coming early. The stress had triggered his cycle. That explained the dizziness, the hypersensitivity to Kalen's presence. I didn't know," Yeonwoo whispered, shame coloring his cheeks. "Ignorance is not a defense," Kalen said, sitting back. "It is a liability. One I intend to correct." The car glided through the massive iron gates of the estate. The Obsidian Palace lived up to its name, a sprawling structure of dark stone and glass, perched on a cliff overlooking the churning sea. It was beautiful, cold, and inescapable. When the car stopped, Kalen didn't wait for the chauffeur. He opened the door and pulled Yeonwoo out, his grip tight on the Omega's wrist. He dragged him not to the guest quarters, not to the dungeon, but straight to the master wing. Servants bowed low as they passed, their eyes averted. They knew better than to witness the Duke in this state. The air around Kalen was vibrating with suppressed rage and dominance. They entered the master bedroom, a cavernous space dominated by a massive bed draped in black silk. Kalen threw Yeonwoo onto the mattress. Yeonwoo bounced on the soft surface, scrambling to the center, hugging his knees to his chest. "Kalen, please. Let's just talk." Kalen began to unbutton his damp trench coat, tossing it onto a chair, then the suit jacket. Then he began to roll up the sleeves of his shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle. "We are past talking," Kalen said, walking toward the bed. "You ran away. You rejected my protection. You rejected me. I rejected a prison." Yeonwoo yelled. "You keep me locked in here. I can't see my family. I can't go outside without 5 guards. That isn't love, Kalen. That's ownership." Kalen stopped at the edge of the bed. He placed a hand on the mattress, leaning over Yeonwoo, caging him in. "Do you know who sits on the throne of the West?" Kalen asked, his voice deceptively conversational. Yeonwoo blinked, confused by the change in topic. "General Varkov." "Varkov is dead," Kalen corrected. "Assassinated 3 days ago. By a poison derived from the Silver Lily." Yeonwoo gasped. The Silver Lily was the crest of his own family, the fallen house of Ethelgard. "Your uncle," Kalen continued, his eyes hard, "orchestrated the coup. He believes that if he can retrieve you, the only Omega capable of bearing a pure-blood heir, he can legitimize his claim to the throne. If you had stepped 1 foot out of this forest, Yeonwoo, you wouldn't have found freedom. You would have been tossed into a breeding camp or executed to spite me." The blood drained from Yeonwoo's face. You're lying." "I never lie to what is mine," Kalen snarled. "I locked you away because half the continent wants to use you as a political pawn. I restricted your movements because there are spies in my own court waiting for a slip-up. I built this cage to keep the wolves out, not to keep you in. But you were too busy playing the victim to see the blade at your throat." Yeonwoo's defiance shattered. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The sudden seclusion, the increased guards, Kalen's late nights and tense demeanor. He hadn't been a tyrant. He had been a warden holding back a tide of blood. "Why?" Yeonwoo's voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Kalen let out a harsh, humorless laugh. He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. The red glow in his eyes faded to a weary mahogany. Because I am arrogant, Kalen admitted, staring at his hands. I thought if I just kept you safe, if I gave you everything, you wouldn't need to know how ugly the world had become. I wanted to preserve your innocence. Instead, I made you hate me. The silence in the room shifted. The fear in Yeonwoo's chest began to dissipate, replaced by a dull ache. He looked at the man before him, the feared Grand Duke, the monster of the North, and saw only a man terrified of losing the one thing he couldn't control. Yeonwoo uncurled his legs. He moved slowly, crawling across the silk sheets until he was kneeling behind Kalen. I don't hate you, Yeonwoo whispered. Kalen stiffened but didn't turn around. I hate feeling helpless, Yeonwoo clarified. I hate being in the dark. If we are fated, Kalen, then you cannot treat me like a child. You have to treat me like a partner. Kalen turned his head, his gaze searching Yeonwoo's face. And if I do? If I tell you the horrors of my work? If I show you the blood on my hands? Will you not run then? I ran because I thought you were the monster, Yeonwoo said softly, reaching out to touch Kalen's shoulder. The contact sent a spark through both of them, the bond humming in delight. But if the monsters are out there, then I want to be behind the one who can kill them. Kalen's expression crumpled, a crack in the marble mask. He turned fully, wrapping his arms around Yeonwoo's waist and burying his face in the Omega's stomach. It was a gesture of surrender, shocking in its vulnerability. I nearly tore the forest down finding you, Kalen muffled against the fabric of Yeonwoo's tunic. When I couldn't feel you, it was like dying. Yeonwoo hesitated, then wove his fingers into Kalen's damp, dark hair. I'm here. I'm not running anymore. For a moment, there was peace. But the universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. A siren blared. Not the soft chime of the palace service, but the jarring, rhythmic howl of the perimeter breach alarm. Kalen was on his feet in a second, the vulnerability vanishing instantly, replaced by the cold lethality of the Grand Duke. He moved to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. They're here, Kalen cursed. Your uncle's mercenaries. They must have tracked the car. Yeonwoo scrambled off the bed. What do we do? Kalen walked to a hidden panel in the wall, pressing his palm against it. It slid open to reveal a cache of weapons. He pulled out a heavy, matte black handgun and a silver dagger. He turned to Yeonwoo, extending the dagger. Take this. Yeonwoo's hands shook as he took the weapon. It was heavy cold. There is a safe room beneath the library, Kalen said rapidly, checking the magazine of his gun. Go. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. What about you? Yeonwoo asked, panic rising again. I'm going to remind them why the North is feared, Kalen said, his eyes glowing that terrifying crimson again. Go. Yeonwoo ran. He sprinted down the hallway, the sound of glass shattering and distant gunfire echoing from the lower floors. The palace was under siege. He reached the library, his breath coming in short gasps. He found the hidden lever behind the bookshelf, just as Kalen had shown him once in passing. The passage opened, but he didn't go in. He stopped, gripping the dagger. If I go in there, I am just the bird in the cage again, he thought. Asterisk safe. Protected. Useless. Asterisk. He thought of Kalen, alone against a mercenary army. Kalen, who had driven into a storm to save him. Kalen, who had admitted his fear. Partner, Yeonwoo had said. Treat me like a partner. Yeonwoo turned away from the safe room. He tightened his grip on the dagger. His heat was rising, his body feverish, but his mind was crystal clear. He knew the layout of the palace better than any intruder. He knew the ventilation shafts. He knew the shadows. He wasn't a soldier, but he was an Omega of House Ethelgard, and he knew something about his uncle that Kalen didn't. His uncle was superstitious. He feared the curse of the White Wolf, the ancestral guardian of Yeonwoo's bloodline. Yeonwoo ripped the white silk of his tunic, tying it around his face like a mask, leaving only his fierce, determined eyes visible. I am not a damsel, he thought, slipping into the shadows of the corridor. I am the Duke's mate. The main hall was a war zone. Debris littered the marble floor. Kalen was behind a tipped-over oak table, firing with precision, but he was pinned down. 6 mercenaries in tactical gear were advancing, their suppression fire chipping away at Kalen's cover. Give up the boy, Duke, a voice boomed, Uncle Varric. He stood on the balcony above, Safe, arrogant. And I might let you die quickly. Kalen snarled, checking his ammo. 2 rounds left. He was cornered. He had been reckless, distracted by his need to ensure Yeonwoo's safety. At least he is safe, Kalen thought, bracing himself for the end. At least Yeonwoo is locked away. Suddenly, the lights in the main hall flickered and died. Total darkness plunged the room into confusion. What is this? Varric shouted. Night vision. Now, but before they could activate their gear, a sound echoed through the hall. A high, whistling sound, like wind through a ravine. From the ventilation shaft above the balcony, a figure dropped. Small, lithe, silent. Yeonwoo landed behind his uncle. He didn't hesitate. He jammed the silver dagger into the junction box on the wall, severing the backup generator connection, sparking a shower of blue electricity that blinded the men on the balcony. The wolf, someone screamed in the confusion. Yeonwoo didn't fight them, he couldn't. He used the chaos. He grabbed a heavy vase and smashed it over the railing, sending it crashing down onto the mercenaries below. It wasn't lethal, but it was a distraction. Kalen, Yeonwoo screamed into the dark. 3 o'clock. Flank. Kalen didn't question the voice. He didn't question how Yeonwoo was there. He trusted the bond. He rolled out from cover, firing blindly into the darkness at the 3 o'clock position. 2 bodies hit the floor. The tide turned. The mercenaries, disoriented by the darkness and the sudden ambush from above, faltered. Kalen surged forward, a demon in the shadows, using his superior alpha strength to tear through the remaining line. Within minutes, silence returned to the hall, broken only by the groans of the fallen. The emergency lights buzzed to life, bathing the room in a sickly red glow. Kalen stood amidst the wreckage, chest heaving, blood dripping from a cut on his brow. He looked up at the balcony. Yeonwoo stood there, the makeshift mask hanging around his neck, the dagger clutched in his hand. He was shaking, terrified, but he was standing tall. Varric was gone, fled in the confusion of the blackout. Kalen walked up the grand staircase, his steps heavy. He approached Yeonwoo, who looked ready to be scolded, ready to be sent back to the cage. Kalen stopped in front of him. He looked at the dagger, then at Yeonwoo's fierce, tear-streaked face. I told you to go to the safe room, Kalen said, his voice raspy. I told you I wasn't running anymore, Yeonwoo countered, lifting his chin. Kalen stared at him for a long, agonizing moment. Then, slowly, he dropped to his knees. It was a shock that sent a ripple through the room. The Grand Duke, kneeling before anyone. He took Yeonwoo's hand, the one holding the dagger, and pressed his forehead against the back of it. I have spent my life conquering kingdoms, Kalen whispered, the vibration traveling through Yeonwoo's skin. But tonight, you conquered me. Yeonwoo dropped the dagger. It clattered loudly on the floor. He fell to his knees as well, wrapping his arms around Kalen's neck, the adrenaline finally crashing, leaving him sobbing into the Duke's bloody coat. Don't lock me up again, Yeonwoo cried. Kalen pulled back, cupping Yeonwoo's face. He kissed him, not with the hunger of a starving man, but with the reverence of a believer finding his God. It was a kiss that tasted of iron, rain, and a promise kept. Never, Kalen swore against his lips. From this night on, the cage is open. But the world will burn before I let anyone touch you. Yeonwoo smiled, a weak, watery thing, but genuine. The heat of his cycle was returning, stronger now, demanding and undeniable. Take me to bed, Kalen, Yeonwoo whispered, and claim what you fought for. Kalen stood, pulling Yeonwoo up with him. The darkness of the palace was no longer a prison, it was their kingdom. And as he carried his mate back toward the shadows of the master wing, the golden cage was left behind, its door wide open, forever useless against a bird that chose to stay. And that is how the emperor broke his wings only to teach him how to fly. If you enjoyed seeing Yeonwoo take control of his destiny, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who locked you up to save your life? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Kalen, tall, muscular, wearing black trench coat and suit, slicked back black hair, glowing red eyes, Intense possessive expression, holding Man 2's chin. Man 2. Yeonwoo, smaller frame, messy silver hair, wearing torn muddy white silk shirt, kneeling in rain and mud, looking up with teary defiant eyes, submissive but scared. Background is dark rainy forest at night, headlights of black car in distance, dramatic cinematic lighting, heavy rain effects, emotional atmosphere, sharp focus, intricate details.